Guys, welcome to session number 3 of our Lunch and Learns. We have Pedro Gustavo Torres with us today. He's currently Director of Engineering at Salsify. He's going to be explaining a bit about his career and what Salsify is and what he has done. From my part, I say Pedro, I really enjoy hearing Pedro. I've joined him in a couple of roundtables and a few sessions, and I love hearing him and how he explains, especially given his engineering background, his ability to show and showcase information is really, really helpful. I aligned with Peter to talk a bit about the relationship between engineering and product management, which sometimes can work really well, but sometimes might not work really well. But we're always keen to making it really work, because there are two very important parts to deliver software and products that solve people's problems. And I have a few questions here to see how this works and how this has worked in Pedro's life. And I want to appreciate you, Pedro, for making the time to join us here for these 45 to an hour to 60 minutes. Keen to see your answers, and thanks again for joining us. So I give you the stage. Who is Pedro? Tell us a bit about your story.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Actually, it's quite a big pleasure to be partnering here with Andre. I think that you already met him or had a chance to. He has a remarkable career in product here in Portugal. Definitely one of our Portuguese stars in the industry. So I'm really excited to join this conversation. So, a little bit about myself. So my name is Pedro. I started my career as a software developer, not a brilliant one. So this is actually one of the things that I'm perfectly fine assuming. So I was actually quite average, I think. And that's why after like 6 years or so, I decided that I needed to get out of development and start doing some sort of management or so, just because I understood that I was actually much better with humans than with keyboards. And so it was pretty much a no-brainer that I should move into kind of management, regardless of being projects or teams. After doing that, I kind of shifted from waterfall to agile and scrum, which then was pretty much, I would probably consider like the huge or the biggest boost on my career, and that allowed me to work in very exciting companies like Farfetch, Sky in the UK, so the television broadcast company, Blip, Talkdesk. So I've been there for almost like 5 years and managed around like 80 engineers or so. So it was like a huge ride for sure. And today, obviously, I'm working at Salsify. So I'm doing almost a year now. So it's actually quite interesting. Time flies for sure. And even more in a year where we are all kind of locked at home and working remote, which is definitely a big challenge for all of us. And yes, and pretty much I'm having a blast and trying to make sure that I continue to learn every day. So I think
Awesome.
that's me.
It's a great track. It's the most interesting part is you've been exposed to huge companies, to growth startups, to scale-ups that have been delivering products to unicorns. So you've seen kind of everything. So I want to start with that. The fact that you've seen a lot of things, which gave you the opportunity to work with product, with engineering teams, to manage engineering teams. So my first question is, what are for you, based on your past and from what you've seen, the most important things that PMs should know that help them perform with really, really good engineering teams? What's the advice you'd give?
Sure. So the thing that I tend to see over and over and over again, and this is almost like a trap for PMs, is that the exercise of estimating. So let's say when we kind of look to a big piece of work and we try to get some sort of figure, regardless of being t-shirt sizes or points or time, whatever, effort, you name it, that's a very hard and complex exercise to be done. And my feel here is that I think that we have the very I don't know, I don't want to call it wrong, but definitely not the best expectations around what an estimate represents. Because at the end of the day, when we are giving an estimate, we are giving our best kind of to predict something that we want to predict. So big chunk of work when it will get done. But the truth is that there are so many variables to take in consideration that I think that the team that gets it right all the time, that's pretty much a myth. That simply doesn't exist. So I truly believe that it's a very hard exercise to be done. And even so, even more difficult than that is that one thing that obviously doesn't help is that usually when we kind of think about an estimation, we think about pretty much ideal days. So let's say if I think that something takes like say a week, I'm imagining that I'm going to have like the entire week to work, everything's going to go great and as expected, and like say no sort of surprises whatsoever. So kind of just smooth work. And then usually what happens is, or something was kind of overlooked, or we just didn't know that thing that it appeared along the way, or actually we just got like an incident or different work that just appeared or a bug or so, and so we actually didn't have the chance to invest that entire week on this work. The problem with all of this, obviously, besides the difficulty, is that, well, the date's not going to appear, so things are not going to show up done. There will start kind of to appear some sort of distrust between everyone, saying, okay, but you just mentioned that didn't happen. Okay, so next time you're going to tell me a week, I'm going to put here my buffer and probably say like 2 more days, and then maybe that will happen again, even with those 2 days, and then all of a sudden we have a problem that is PM versus rest of the team, and is that sort of situation where everybody loses.
Yeah, it's true. I completely agree. And I have a belief, and I'd love to touch on that because you mentioned estimations a few times on your answer. So I have a belief that the majority, maybe if not all, of product managers tend to fall in this planning fallacy that they're way too optimistic, even beyond product managers, even engineering teams, way too optimistic on their estimations, way too optimistic on how fast things can get done. Do you feel this is true? Do you feel that this tends to happen? And what do you do to actually get out of this planning fallacy and make things a bit more accurate when you estimate?
No, you're absolutely right. I think that we as humans, we are positive by nature. So we always assume that everything goes, as expected, even more because it's us. So it's going to be us that's going to do the work. If we'd be kind of estimating for some other team, maybe you could actually be a little bit more kind of saying, okay, so maybe I'm a little bit more senior, that team is a little bit more junior. So, and probably would probably cut them a slack, but we know that, no, it's me, I know what I'm doing. So, and so I think that definitely we tend to be really positive here. I think that's a very hard question to have the right answer for, because I really believe that. So the estimation exercise is definitely a hard exercise to be done. And I think that, let's say, if you lock your team in a room and you invest 1 day or two, I think that you will probably get a very estimate with a very high quality for sure. Let's say like 2 days pure investment on kind of figuring out how the next X weeks are going to go. But the thing is that that's not exactly true if you kind of grab the team and you lock them for an entire week. So I think that actually there is a point where you're starting to get diminishing return. That is, up to a point of investment, probably you're going to see like a very interesting uplift on the quality of your estimate. But just because you're going to put the double of the time on trying to figure out that estimate, I don't think the estimate will be much better. And I say this because, let's say, when we are starting a project, there are a lot of unknowns, right? So maybe it's new technology, maybe it's that sort of infrastructure, coding language, maybe we don't know exactly if the user experience is exactly the one that we have today, and maybe we are also still doing some sort of user testing. And so when we are beginning a project, it's definitely when we have the biggest unknowns. And those unknowns naturally are going to be sorted out as we are implementing the project. So definitely after half of the project get done, I have much more answers and certainties than when we are beginning. And so kind of my big advice here for all of you is definitely grab an estimate. And an estimate to me is really important for two things. So first, I definitely need to have a kind of some sort of idea when something will get done, but also, is this worth it? Sometimes it always is, because let's say we want to launch a mobile app, but sometimes let's say we have two very different features, and one is much more interesting than the other. But you know what? The much more interesting one takes 6 months, and the other one only takes, let's say, a month to get done. So I, as a PM, I actually can take a look to both of them and say, no, definitely I first want kind of to tackle this one just because it's just 1 month. And maybe this one with 6 months, maybe I don't even have an ROI for it. So maybe I'm actually not going to advance it, or maybe it's not the right time or not the right team. Maybe I need to wait for something to get unlocked so that it actually gets cheaper. So to me, the estimates are really important to get the go or no go. And then obviously with that, also how can we actually make sure that we actually try to nail the correct date. One thing that also is a certainty is dates move, and that's fine. Usually they always move forward and never backwards. So that's pretty much, that's assured. No one can kind of say, oh no, it's fine, we are going to kind of to speed up here and we are going to kind of recover the delay. That never happens, trust me, I've been there for many times. And so what I think that is really important is for us to revise the dates very frequently, and as soon as we are working, let's say per week, per sprint, it doesn't matter. Are we keeping this real? Are we talking the difficult conversation of saying, is this still make sense? Are we getting there or not? Because probably one of the biggest advice that I can give to this group is hard conversations are definitely hard to have, but they are much more harder later on any sort of stage. So, the sooner you have them, the easier they get.
Yeah, it's completely true. And your answer validates a bit what we talked yesterday on yesterday's session around the importance of two things. One, making and focusing on shorter, quicker cycles of development, shorter features to get more feedback, but to also be more accurate around when you're going to deliver something versus longer cycles or longer features, as well as the importance of communication and how important it is for communication to flow and how that actually buys you a lot of information both ways and manages expectations. So talking about communication, I also have a belief that the more the product and the engineering teams are siloed from each other, the less likely you are to build products that actually work, the less likely you are to manage expectations. So my question to you is, so two questions. One, how do you foster a really strong relationship between product and engineering? And the second question, how do you get these teams to be aligned in a common vision, a common product vision?
Sure. So going to the first one. So the relationship is something that it's definitely like super important for us to have. It's almost like a marriage, right? So it's not just about getting married, it's actually kind of for the long run. So I think it's easier to kind of to establish the relationship than to maintain it. So maintain it takes a lot of effort, and sometimes I think that we kind of overlook that a little bit and take it for granted. So you really need kind of to nurture this relationship and make sure that it's kind of valid, it's still to the in the spot that you wanted that relationship to be. And I think that there's like two thoughts that come to mind when I think about this relationship. So one is, I think that past literature actually did a pretty big damage on the relationship between product and engineering. And it's a very silly thing, but definitely I think that even today has its repercussions. That is on the Scrum guide. And I'm talking about Scrum because I don't know, like probably more than 50% of companies that are developing products use Scrum, or are they using today, or at least they used sometime in the past. And in the Scrum guide, it was always mentioned that you had the product owner, not even manager. That's another very interesting conversation. So you had the product owner and the core team or development team. So when you read something like this, you're already kind of putting a gap between some sort of team, whatever that is, and the role. In this case, is product. And so when I was talking to my teams, I always mentioned over and over and over again that the team is all of us, not kind of a team and the product manager like a stakeholder or a satellite. So that's like the first thing that I really believe that didn't help a lot on creating strong relationships. And my personal advice or my personal experience of something that needs to be done is, I always had okay or even good relationship with my product counterpart. But one thing that I did quite recently, and it's been amazing, and I just regret that I didn't start doing that sooner, is now I meet daily with my counterpart. So pretty much what I'm saying is that from Monday to Friday, I invest 1 hour of my time on my relationship with my product director. And so we meet. He has lunch during that meeting, just like we mentioned in the beginning. And it's really interesting because we can be talking about objectives, team health, stakeholders, the ones that are more difficult, the ones that are more easy. How is the company? How is his family, and such. And so it's really interesting because when you talk daily to someone, and we have the cameras and everything, you really create a relationship and you really kind of foster trust. Remember, it takes a long time to create trust, but trust to go away just takes a couple of days. It's just about kind of being silent, and all of a sudden we start to not have such a good thoughts about the other person, or maybe we start doubting that the person has good intentions. So really don't overlook this, because this is really important.
So
Going
you,
to
yeah,
I was going to reply about the
yeah.
alignment, but please go ahead.
No, no, no. Go, go, go,
Oh,
go. Yeah.
regarding alignment, to be entirely honest, I just met two very interesting tools to assure that. So in order for teams to be aligned, we really need to explain the why. And when I say we, I'm expecting usually someone from product, the person that is kind of holding, the vision, like the customer's will or need or gap that we want to fulfill. And so it's really interesting to sell kind of promote the why next to the team, because the why pretty much ties to the intrinsic motivation. If I know the real purpose, the expected outcome, I'm going to make much better decisions on my day to day. Those tools that I've met so far that are really powerful. One of them, it's OKRs, which I think it's quite popular now. Google uses it all the time. But one that we've been experimenting quite recently, it's called V2 Moms, which is actually has a very odd name, but it's pretty much kind of some sort of flavor of OKRs that was built by Salesforce. And pretty much it just kind of says that for any sort of product that you are building, you should establish your vision and values, in the sense that a vision is what we want to achieve, the values is what we value while we are going through this journey of achieving the vision. And then we have methods, that is kind of concrete stuff that we want to do, obstacles that we might find, so MO, and then finally measures. So what are the needles that we want to move so that we know that we are going to be successful? This maybe sounds a little bit more complex than OKRs, but it actually kind of brings a lot of richness to the process. And at least so far, I've been quite happy using them.
I love that your answers are I'm making like check and check on the things that we touched on every week, which is
Oh,
great.
cool.
Really good. I want to go a bit deeper on the topic of trust. On one of the first, I think on the first session, we mentioned that trust is one of the most powerful weapons product managers need to yield. So because they don't lead with authority, they lead through influence. And I believe that and this is a great conversation with your counterpart. How do product or how do engineering leads, engineering directors, engineering leaders help the product team gain the trust of the engineering team? Do you have any tips? How do you do this? How do you help those PMs at Salsify make sure that they're trusted by your own team that you lead and manage?
Sure. I think that we have like three key ingredients for us to achieve that. So first, definitely is respect. And when I say respect is, I think it's really easy to fall into this trap that, let's say, oh, okay, I'm going just to put some names out there. I'm going to use Kubernetes and some other sort of fancy technology. But hey, I'm not going to explain this to product. They don't understand this. They are not technical. And so all of a sudden we are just kind of downplaying any sort of team member, right? But then what kind of bugs me is that it's usually kind of people don't, or engineers don't feel that bad thinking about product, but they would never think about that as, let's say, of a junior engineer on their team. So actually this kind of upsets me a little bit, and I think that definitely it's wrong and such. So I really believe in respect, saying no one is dumb, and it's my responsibility to communicate in the right way and comprehensive way challenges, regardless of being technology wise or organization wise. Because again, like if the person doesn't have enough context, well, if I'm good enough and I know my stuff, I should be able to explain it and make sure the person understands. So definitely respect needs to be number one. And obviously what I'm talking about here, and we already mentioned this in this conversation, is communication. So we really need to communicate often. So don't just go away. And this one is really tricky, pretty much because of one thing. I really believe that we tend to confuse the product owner with the product manager role. And so again, the product owner seems like, that lovely person that is always around the team, writing user stories and making sure that everyone is pleased. And at the end of the day, just kind of maybe signs off some stuff regarding acceptance criteria. But in truth, we are usually talking about product managers, and product managers, besides helping a team succeed, they have several other things that obviously at the eyes of the rest of the engineers, it seems like they are just going away. but they are not. They are sitting with customers. They are sitting with stakeholders like support, customer success, sales. They are even looking for the ROI of the product that we already have in production, and kind of, and giving some answers regarding it. So it's really tough, the product manager role, in my opinion. But the important thing is, it really needs to have a lot of communication. So if we actually believe that, let's say, we are having good communication, I'm pretty sure that that's not enough. You really should aim for brilliant. And if you think that you are having an okay communication, I'm pretty sure that the communication is kind of really, really not so interesting, and you really need to level up that game. Finally, transparency. Just be honest with your team. Like, if we are a team, if we are in the same boat, like, say what you need to say, explain things as they are. Sure, we are always tempted to shield our teams a little bit from, from that hidden stakeholder, or for that sort of pressure or deadline. But at the end of the day, if we are a team and we have the same common goal, I really believe that within logic, and and being a little bit intelligent about it, being really transparent, making sure that we all understand what we are here for and what people expect out of us.
I love those principles. I think it makes absolute sense, especially the transparency, which then connects directly with communication, because generally communication, when you have transparency, is so much easier. Often the thing that impacts negatively on communication is how do you manage the lack of transparency that exists, that you need to be careful. And when you don't have that obstacle, everything seems just easier. So I wanna go even deeper on the almost the day-to-days. So imagine that, and we have a wide group here that has a number of people that want to join the product world, want to become PMs. Some of these guys and gals are already PMs. So what are common traps you see product managers fall into when dealing with their engineering peers? Things that you'd love to tell them, look, maybe you're starting, and this is likely stuff that you're going to do, and stuff that you're probably going to do wrongly, or that I recommend or advise you not to do. Do you have this type of things that you've seen in the past that you tell now to new PMs? Look, be careful about this.
Yes, absolutely. At least one or two for sure. I think that my first advice for any PM, and I would probably say exactly the same thing for the EM too. So for the engineering manager, is always assume positive intent. So I don't really believe that we are all here kind of, just trying to make them the best for us, and not caring about a team. So again, like, trust, it's a two-way street. So it really takes two to tango. So in order for us to be trusted, we are also need kind of to show that we are trustworthy. And so definitely, I really believe that we should assume good intent, and that we are all giving our best. But obviously, you need to bear in mind that definitely, let's say, Andre's best is very different from mine, for instance, or even looking just to myself, every day my best will be different, which doesn't mean that I'm not putting everything that I have every single day. Very, very important. And definitely, I believe that Andre is has some very interesting stories that I see PMs working a lot, so putting a lot of hours, like way more than they should. And pretty much because I think this is just like UX, the companies don't have enough PMs. And that's just crazy. And so what usually happens is that, a PM usually, instead of just kind of running a team or a product, actually, as soon as he notices, he actually is running like several teams or several products. And the funny thing is that usually it means that he's just being really good at what he's doing. So he's being competent. And so typically the prize is just to get more work, which is really hard. What is the problem here? Obviously, just like any sort of human that is kind of, not burning out, but with tons of hours, let's say 60 hours a week, and all of a sudden you're just trying to make sure that you don't drop any sort of ball, you will start to overlook some stuff. Or maybe you will start expecting some things out of the team that maybe the team doesn't know even how to do it. Let's say some sort of discovery phase, or maybe some sort of meeting customers in calls, and they've never done it before. And so I think that because of so many hours, PMs tend to sometimes make some bad decisions, mainly around kind of thinking, oh, the team is not putting enough effort. Oh, this is not happening like I wished. And again, usually it's just because you just have too much stuff on your plate. And so I would probably say that my biggest advice to you is be really honest about what you can take or not. We are not superhumans. We are not supermen or superwomen, women, and definitely reach out for help. And remember that it's not because you have a huge portfolio, it doesn't mean that you're better. It just means that probably you're better at multitasking. And I can say that the best PMs that I've worked so far are the ones that actually just stick to a product, maybe have one team, two tops, but that's it. They know their capacity and they do a remarkable job, because no one can do a remarkable job running 10 teams and 10 different products. That's for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I want to add up as a personal experience, I felt and still feel a lot of times exactly what you mentioned. What I've seen from PMs that I've recruited is we tend to look for overachievers, people who are really, really good. They stand out in a certain sense because we're used to this reality where we just offload so much stuff on the shoulders of product managers, and usually under capacity or under resourced because the budgets are not being focused there. And then these people are usually used to perform, and they overwhelm themselves because often they tend to start failing not in the sense that maybe the product's not working, but you feel like failing towards your team because you serve the team in a certain sense. And this actually becomes a really tough loop of you putting even more because you don't want to fail. You're not used to failing. And then oftentimes the team depends on you. So it becomes this weird cycle or this weird loop where you can't actually get out. And I feel what
Yeah.
you said is really, really important is communication, especially communication up, saying like, look, it is really overwhelming me. It's gonna eventually gonna hit, it's gonna bite, especially on the user's end or the client's end, where the product's gonna start underperforming because I missed something. So I really think you touched on a really, really good point. So I have another question. You managed a lot of teams, a lot of different squads. You mentioned that you had at a certain point 80 engineers, maybe I think it was on Talkdesk, right?
Yeah.
So you've seen a lot of different teams. So I have two questions on this. One, with different teams and different squads, you probably had different product managers in all these teams.
Mhm.
And a lot of times what happens is PMs get that feel wrongly or consciously or unconsciously that they're managing the team. And that's technically not true. How do you help these PMs understand that they are not managing the team? And the second question on teams is, what have you seen that differentiates a really strong performing team that delivers versus one that's either just average maybe or even failing?
No, sure. So regarding PMs having the feel that they are managing the team, I think that really ties to the delivery responsibilities, because we have engineer managers. Engineer managers are definitely the line managers of the team. So definitely, let's say I'm expecting for my EM to have regular one-to-ones with all the team members and look after their growth as a professional and even as a person. What I then believe that happens is, I think that the PMs are accountable for the team delivery. And so what usually happens, or at least in the majority of the companies, is that the CEO or someone above will actually ask the PM how things are going. They probably are not going to ask the engineering manager. They are going actually to ask the PM saying, hey, so why haven't you shipped this product or this feature? And usually it's always the PM on the hook. I'm not saying that the EM is not responsible too, because definitely he is. He's running the team. But at the end of the day, I think that the PM, it's always kind of at stake there and kind of always under pressure. And so I think that definitely the PM kind of needs to, kind of just put their hands in matter and try to help out and do the best they can. Obviously, this has a huge problem, that is, it's really easy to fall into the trap of micromanagement, because I am the PM, I've been asked about this. And so, look, I want this engineer doing that. I want that engineer doing that. And that's usually not good for trust, for the relationship and everything. But also very important is that, with pressure, we tend to actually to be really eager to start something as soon as possible. So let's say there is actually a kind of a joke that usually we say that is, okay, so on the first day of a project, we are already late, because kind of we had some missed expectations. We were talking about the project almost like 3 months ago, and then all of a sudden the execs were actually hoping that this would be kind of started way sooner. And so what usually happens is that I see that there is a huge temptation of starting a lot of things at the same time. And then the problem with that, and I think that we already learned from Lean, is that the more things you have in progress, the later you're going to finish all of them. So it's really, really hard to avoid this temptation of starting things, because you really want kind of to start the wheels in motion, and all of a sudden we are actually putting the team slower. And yes, and so I think that at the end of the day, what really needs to happen, in my opinion, is a shared responsibility between product and engineering. So it's not just the PM being called and asked why this is not happening, because definitely I understand that PM is defining priorities, but at the end of the day, the PM is not doing the code. He really can't just achieve a date by herself or himself. So I really would like to see the engineer manager also being called to those meetings where, people are going to ask difficult questions, and things are what they are. And then I think that all ties to what we've been discussing about hard conversations, transparency, communication, and so on. So that's kind of my thoughts about kind of PMs and kind of thinking that they kind of run the team. Strong teams versus not so successful teams. I've seen some patterns in the past for sure, of what kind of, what makes the difference. So one of them definitely is how gelled the team is. Okay, so I really don't care if we are putting together 5 rock stars. At the end of the day, if they are going to just start to work as a team on that specific moment, they will take a long time to actually to get to the sort of level of full potential that we want to achieve out of that team. So a team really needs to have some sort of stability and kind of creating their own dynamics, and understand that, for instance, I've been working with Andre for the last, let's say, 1 year or two. So I know that when he says this, he actually mentions that, or he actually expects this out of us. So I think it's really important to establish these sort of routines and sort of I don't know, expectations that, from everyone that are being built, and definitely that takes time to get there. Um, Last but not least, I think that is also very important, is that the most successful teams that I've seen are the teams that actually know how to break work in very small units. And I'm saying this because if we grab a huge project, so let's say a project that takes, let's say, 1 year or 1 year and a half to get done, it's not that rare to see that those sort of projects. The teams that are, experienced enough, clever enough to actually to look to a project like that and understand how that can be split into chunks, into milestones, work with product to understand what an MVP looks like. How can we actually make sure that we can start putting this in front of customers and start to get some sort of validation? How can we test our hypotheses? I see that those teams that actually understand that iterations, it's not a waste of time, but actually kind of a gift that we can actually improve and get better with time and reduce hugely or greatly risk. I think those are definitely the teams that are set for success and that I've seen delivering the most.
Yeah, I really agree. I used the same. Your answer correlates or resonates exactly with the different squads I had in the past, and even when comparing different squads, their performance and delivery and how people acted, I think it resonates a lot. One thing that I would also add is the more times I see a product manager reaching out to their peers, to their team, and simply asking, how can I help? How can I remove some obstacles? Is there information that you probably is in front of you that's keeping you from running? Or the simple question of how can I help, that unlocks the communication from the engineering or the design team into saying, look, you can't help because A, B, and C is happening, and you wouldn't get that information if you wouldn't ask, how can I help? And that information itself is valuable for you to manage expectations up, to manage expectations with customers and users, which then in the end of the day, expectations, which is a topic that isn't touched as often as it should, is the difference between performance and non-performant. If
Oh,
you deliver
absolutely.
on expectations or above, you're performing. If you miss expectations, you're underperforming. So it's all, everything is very relative, and it's all tied to expectations. Um,
Agree.
so I have a question here. It's a bit more specific question, but I wanted to get your feel on this, which is a lot of people. So for all of you who will eventually join a product team or become product managers, you'll go through something which is the difference between code done and code live. And the difference here is, so you think about a feature, you deliver or you work with your engineering team, and it starts getting done. And from a code perspective, it's finished. But until the product's actually in the customer's hands, it's not solving problems yet. So my question to you, Pedro, is how do you also change the mindset of engineering teams that what matters really is a product live in the hands of customers solving a problem and not just the code done and then you go to the next? How do you change this culture and mindset, which in my belief is very common across companies, but
Sure.
needs to change? How do you do this? Or would you
No,
agree?
absolutely. I have at least like two tips and a bad news, I think. So the first tip is definitely I've seen companies instead of having or regardless of having an engineering and product departments, they tend to call themselves R&D. And that's actually something that I've seen working quite well because it kind of closes the gap. And we then start to understand that it's not just about engineering. It's not about just kind of making beautiful lines of code. And we are actually kind of, a big group that involves product and engineering. And then product can actually kind of bring this customer mindset, which I think that is really powerful. The other one that I also believe is that, in my opinion, we shouldn't have engineering teams. We should have product engineering teams because the time where we were just kind of doing engineering for the sake of it, that was back in college. When we were kind of doing some sort of assignment or so, we were exploring some stuff, or maybe we're actually over the weekend and just having fun on a pet project. From 9 to 5, from Monday to Friday, we are actually working towards our customers, and our customers use our product. So we don't have engineers by themselves. We actually have product engineers that really want to understand customers. They want to understand the whys and how can we actually help the customers to succeed. So that's kind of, kind of being all rallied up with a mission, with always the customer in mind, and not just kind of, the technology or the thing that, don't get me wrong, obviously they are important and usually a key motivator for retention and even for hiring great engineers. But again, like, if we don't have the right goal in mind, that is in this case the customer needs, we are not going to do the best job that we can. Here's the bad news. We actually have people, and that's fine too, I think, that just say, you know what, I don't care about that at all. Just tell me what to do. I'm here, just to do my code. I'm pretty much tech driven. I don't care about if you're telling me the why. To me, that's just pretty much wasting my time. I'm just here to do my thing. And that's kind of okay in the sense that it's their mentality. Some people will never change, and that's okay. You can change behaviors, you can't change people. And some people are happy like with this sort of mindset. And the bad news in this case is that when that happens, I need to tell you that you have the wrong team, or at least the wrong team member. And then you really need to kind of to make sure that the ones that you're kind of gathering around are people that share your kind of mindset, and they actually believe in product engineering and not engineering by itself. And so you really need to make sure that you have the right people with you.
I appreciate the candor and the transparency of bringing bad news, even though you're an optimist by default. I think it's really important. You're managing people's expectations on what they're going to find. So we have some questions here on our chat that I want to bring up to you. I always like
Sure.
to do this. So Francisca is asking what should be her motivation to include technical debt. Technical debt is a great topic. We could spend a lot of time here. So
Love
include
that.
technical debt in sprints. So in the next backlog of things to be tackled. She says, as a PM, I want to give priority to product items and deliver value to customers. And technical debt tend to stay in the backlog forever. So how do you deal with this?
No, that's a great question. I love that one. So here's my thought. There is tech debt and tech debt. So I think that just like any sort of work item that that we bring to the team, let's say we want to bring feature X, and the team expects to hear the why. So kind of we want to kind of tie with the purpose, the intrinsic motivation and such. I expect the same thing out of tech debt. So if I have something on my backlog that says refactor X or move this system from infrastructure A to infrastructure B, I really want the team to explain why. Because at the end of the day, a tech debt card is not kind of a golden card where the team is going to find some time to do whatever they please. No, I really want to understand why is this important, and I want to understand this at least to the perspective of the customer. So let's say we need to do this work because this is going to be more reliable, and so we are not going to have incidents, and the product won't become unavailable, and so the customer will be happier. And so I, as a PM, I can understand. Okay, so what is at least at this given moment more important for me, this new feature or more reliability of my product? Because again, you might have the beautiful product, but if the product is not available or is inconsistent, you're going to lose the customer too, right? So the customer don't just care about features, they also care about reliability and uptime of service, right? Otherwise, I'll just move into another product or app. And so what I'm trying to say here, I think, is that tech debt is definitely something that needs to be addressed, but the PM needs to understand why we are doing this. It's not just about again, about the respect. Oh, we are not going to explain to you because it's really hard. It's Kubernetes. No, explain to me. Why are we going to move this? Why is this more important than the rest? And then, with all the information, you're going to make the right decisions regarding priority. Because trust me, when you go to some sort of executive team meeting, they're going to ask you why you're moving stuff to Kubernetes, and you need to give a sound explanation. So you really need to understand what's happening. And so definitely, I believe that any sort of tech that needs to have some sort of customer impact, and if it doesn't have customer impact, at least will help the team to go faster, which then obviously later will serve better the customer because we're going to ship faster. But without these two kind of motives, I don't see any sort of reason why we should deal with tech debt, at least kind of an obvious one. So that's kind of my call.
The analogy that I generally use to answer this is using taxation as an example. There are taxes that you can pay ahead of time. There are taxes that you can't pay ahead of time, and then there are taxes that it's okay to pay ahead of time because it's worth for you, because you're going to get some benefits out of it. And there are those where you could invest the money in a certain sense, get the money back, and then pay the taxes, and you get a net positive impact. And I think with tech debt, using Pedro's answer, I think it goes a bit hand in hand. So to your, Francisco, to your second question, whether we should be reactive or proactive, I think it depends on the type of tech debt and the type of impact that will have on the customers, or even in the development cycle and the velocity that then you can tackle for future value creation. I think it goes a bit hand in hand. So did that answer your question, Francisco, Pedro's answer? Yeah.
And remember, don't sign blank checks ever. So, if you want, if you're going to give some bandwidth to tech debt, you really need to understand the why and the purpose of it.
Yeah, I think it's also in line with the alignment with the team. I mean, if everyone's aligned towards the common vision and the OKRs are there, and so the engineering team will also be sensible to know what of the tech debt should be included, when not paying too much tax ahead of time, and when also to influence having to pay that tax, and not just keeping pushing and creating more product complexity, and then suddenly breaking down everything and removing all the credibility that you created just because you didn't invest enough. I think it's an absolute important point. So I have a question here for you, Pedro, on principles. You already mentioned a lot of principles here, principles around estimations, around trust, around communication. Do you have any particular principles yourself that you use on a daily basis, or that you use across your leadership, that makes you a role model for your own company, your own teams? Do you have anything that you'd share, one or two principles that are really important for you?
Sure. So I think that's definitely the biggest principle that I try to bring to work every day, is that at the end of the day, we are all people, and people deserve respect. Remember that we are going to work, I don't know, but a lot of time of our lives, right? And remember that between going to sleep, having just very little time for our own things, you're definitely going to spend more time working than doing anything else. It's sad, but it's true. And so I really believe that you really need to enjoy yourself. You really need to have a good time, and you really need to love what you do. So what I usually believe is that I can't imagine myself working in a place where people won't respect me, or it's kind of have some sort of toxic culture. So definitely, kind of do your own share. So, treat people with kindness, treat people with respect. We all deserve, kind of to be treated in the correct way. With that, obviously, comes sometimes some hard decisions. Like, for instance, one book that I read a couple of years ago that is called the no asshole rule. So it means that every now and then you have that asshole in your company that just treats people very, very poorly. Don't accept that, because it's as bad as the person kind of mistreating someone, but also you that is just kind of okay with that and not showing that it's not supposed to be like that. So definitely that's one of the biggest principles that I try to take to work every day. And then one that kind of ties to the other is that I always assume good intent. So if you see like a Slack message, if you see an email, try to see the best out of it. Again, it's really easy for us to take to any sort of communication and just try to see, am I being personally attacked? Am I being criticized? And again, that it simply doesn't lead to anything positive for sure. So it's just going to get you even in more trouble and in a worse situation. And so really just kind of take, kind of assume good intent, and that people are just kind of trying to do their best and with a good purpose in mind. Finally, no internal wars. And what I mean with this is that it's really easy for you to, to work with someone that is kind of just thinking about their own careers, or just trying to get, the best for their department, because they are really kind of, with a siloed vision, instead of kind of thinking about the greater good, the customer and the company. And I really don't have patience for that. Maybe it's because I'm getting older, and I really believe that time is short. But kind of don't give me internal wars, because I don't have any patience for that. It's we are all in the same boat.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think they're great principles. I usually say that try to advocate for the user's agenda, no one's personal agenda. And
Mhm.
and I think it makes absolute sense. So my final question here is, and I always ask this by the end of each of the sessions, which is, what advice would you give your younger self if you were entering the product world and the engineering world today based on what you learned?
Okay, so advice. I would probably tell as an advice that definitely the first years of a career of anyone, they are crucial in my opinion. And what I mean with that is that pretty much there are a lot of things that people are driven by. One of them typically is money. I actually believe that on the first 3 years or so, money is definitely shouldn't be the main motivator. It definitely is, where can you join a company that you can learn the most? And I'm telling you this because sometimes you're actually going to come across several job opportunities where they probably are going to pay you a little bit more than the salary that you're currently getting. But if you're working on the first 3 years on a very exciting company, and you have plenty of them right now in Portugal, thank God, and even more if you work remote, that is going to give you kind of the stamp, the quality that it will sort out your entire future. And that's why, for instance, you actually see people that that mentions on LinkedIn, ex Uber, ex Google, ex Facebook. Why? Because they are proud of what they did, and the experience that they had. Not everyone had a chance to take those, and so that to me it's definitely one of the biggest advices. And then last but not least, I would probably say that throughout our entire career, and especially in the beginning, we all need a little bit of luck. And luck pretty much means when opportunity meets preparation. And what I say with this is that although sometimes opportunity, it doesn't depend just on us, definitely the preparation part is. So grab your steering wheel of your career, educate yourself. Kind of don't wait for a company to sort out your education. Go for trainings, for instance, like even like this one, that is really important. And make sure that you learn most of the things that you can learn, because when the opportunity comes, you really better be prepared for that, because there is no many situations that you're going to be lucky, and luck is definitely something that you build.
Yeah, I completely agree. People underestimate the power of luck, but preparation makes a big part when it comes. Pedro, I really want to appreciate your time here. It was really enriching. A lot of
Thank you.
amazing answers. We have it all recorded. So in the future, if you ever run for politics or public office, we can get back to you. I'm joking, unless I can charge you for that, but no. But I really appreciate your time. This was some really interesting 15 minutes here with you. Thanks for joining us. I hope you
My
guys
pleasure.
enjoyed. If you have questions, you can always, I hope to say this, you can ask, send an invite, LinkedIn invite to Pedro.
Absolutely.
Very welcome to get questions from you. You can also leave on Slack, and I can forward back to Pedro. And thanks for joining on this lunch. Super excited, and thank you guys, and thank you Pedro for joining us.
It was a pleasure.